The flames licked at Blanche Sutton's heels as she fled into the cold Montana night, her husband's drunken curses fading behind her as the farmhouse they'd shared for 6 miserable years became an inferno against the autumn sky of 1885. "I'll see you burn before you leave me." Howard's final threat echoed in her ears as she ran, clutching nothing but the clothes on her back and her mother's locket pressed against her thundering heart. Blanche had known Howard was cruel, but never imagined he'd rather destroy everything than let her escape his tyranny. She'd planned to leave quietly during his next trip to Helena, had sewn coins into her petticoat for weeks, but he'd found her packed bag hidden beneath the floorboards. The whiskey bottle shattered against the wall, then the lantern followed. And their life together erupted into a blaze that consumed everything. Her lungs burned almost as fiercely as the home behind her as she stumbled through the darkness. At 26, Blanche had once been beautiful, with honey gold hair and clear blue eyes that had caught Howard's attention when her father introduced them. Now, soot-stained and trembling, she wondered if she'd traded one death for another as the Montana wilderness stretched before her, indifferent to her plight. Midnight passed, then the small hours of morning. The temperature dropped further, and her thin dress offered little protection. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her escaping fire only to freeze instead. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she collapsed against the trunk of a pine tree, drawing her knees to her chest. "Please, Lord," she whispered, though she'd stopped believing God listened to women like her long ago. "Just let me live until morning." The sound of approaching hoofbeats roused her from half-consciousness. Blanche's heart seized with terror. Had Howard somehow survived and tracked her? She tried to push herself to her feet but found no strength remained. The rider appeared like a ghost from the mist, tall in the saddle atop a chestnut stallion. In the pale moonlight she could make out the broad shoulders of a man, the silhouette of a wide-brimmed hat. "Madam?" His voice was deep but gentle, tinged with concern. "You hurt?" Blanche tried to answer but found her throat too dry, her lips cracked from heat and dehydration. She managed only a weak cough. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, approaching cautiously like she was a wounded animal that might bolt. As he crouched beside her, she caught his features in the moonlight, a square jaw darkened by stubble, eyes the color of creek water, and a face weathered by sun and wind. "Yates Ingram, madam." Ranch foreman at the Silver Creek spread. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The wool smelled of horse, tobacco, and pine, nothing like Howard's perpetual stench of whiskey. "Fire," she finally managed. "My husband." "Easy now." His hands were calloused but careful as he helped her to her feet. "Let's get you somewhere warm first. Talk can wait." When her legs buckled, he caught her without comment, lifting her into his saddle before mounting behind her. His arm circled her waist, solid and secure, as they rode through the night. Blanche should have been frightened, being carried off by a stranger, but fear required energy she no longer possessed. Besides, death by a cowboy's hand seemed preferable to freezing alone in the wilderness or returning to Howard. "The ranch is just over that ridge," Yates said after they'd ridden in silence for nearly an hour. "The boss's wife will help get you settled." As the first hints of dawn crept into the sky, Silver Creek Ranch appeared before them, a sturdy main house, bunkhouse, barn, and outbuildings nestled in a valley protected by pine-covered hills. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney of the main house, promising warmth Blanche had thought she might never feel again. Yates dismounted and helped her down, steadying her when she swayed on her feet. "Mrs. Sutton," he said, and she realized she must have told him her name during the ride, though she couldn't recall doing so. "You're safe now." 3 simple words that she'd longed to hear for years. As consciousness slipped away, Blanche wondered if she could ever truly believe them. When she awoke, Blanche found herself in an unfamiliar bed, beneath clean quilts that smelled of lavender. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating a simple but comfortable bedroom. Her body ached, but the raw terror that had driven her through the night had subsided to a dull wariness. "You're awake." A woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes entered, carrying a tray. "I'm Eleanor Lambert. My husband Joseph owns this ranch." "Blanche Sutton," she replied, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry to impose nonsense." Eleanor set down the tray containing a bowl of steaming broth and fresh bread. "Yates told us he found you half frozen." The poor man was beside himself with worry. Blanche accepted the broth gratefully. "He saved my life." "He mentioned something about a fire?" The memory of flames consuming her prison of a home flashed through her mind. "My husband set our house ablaze. He—" Her hand trembled, spilling broth onto the quilt. "He meant for me to burn with it." Eleanor's face hardened with an understanding that needed no elaboration. "Well, you're safe at Silver Creek now. Joseph and I agreed you're welcome to stay as long as necessary." "I have nowhere to go," Blanche admitted. "No family, no money. We're short-handed since our housekeeper left to care for her mother in Bozeman. The position is yours if you want it." Tears welled in Blanche's eyes. "Why would you help a stranger this way?" Eleanor's smile held shadows of old pain. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it most. Rest now. We can discuss particulars when you're stronger." For 3 days, Blanche drifted between sleep and waking, her body recovering from exposure and exhaustion. Eleanor brought meals and fresh clothing, sitting with her and sharing stories of the ranch and town. On the 4th morning, Blanche felt strong enough to rise. The dress Eleanor had provided was simple but well made, a deep blue that complemented her fair complexion. Blanche studied herself in the mirror, noting how thin her face had become during her years with Howard. The bruise on her cheekbone from his final rage was fading to a sickly yellow. Venturing downstairs, she found a spacious kitchen warmed by a cast-iron stove. Through the window, she could see men working in the corral, breaking horses under the autumn sun. Her eyes were drawn to a familiar tall figure directing the others, Yates Ingram, his shirt sleeves rolled to expose muscular forearms as he gestured to a young ranch hand. "He's a good man," Eleanor said, noticing the direction of her gaze. "Been with us nearly 10 years now. Joseph says he's the finest horseman in 3 territories." "I never properly thanked him." "You'll have your chance. He's been asking after you daily." Eleanor handed Blanche an apron. "Feel up to helping with lunch?" The men work up fearsome appetites. By noon, the kitchen table was laden with plates of fried chicken, biscuits, and bowls of beans. The ranch hands filed in, removing hats and washing up at the pump outside before entering. Yates was the last to arrive, and he paused in the doorway when he spotted Blanche, his expression unreadable. "Miss Sutton," he said with a slight nod. "Good to see you on your feet." "Mr. Ingram?" She found herself unable to meet his gaze for long. "I owe you my life." A hint of color rose above his collar. Any decent man would have done the same. Joseph Lambert, a bear of a man with a booming voice but gentle manner, directed everyone to sit. "Yates, you're just in time. We're discussing the winter preparations. We'll need to move the herd to the south pasture before the first snow." Throughout the meal, Blanche felt Yates's eyes on her occasionally, though whenever she glanced his way, he was focused on his plate or engaged in conversation. She learned he'd come to Montana from Texas after the war, had worked on ranches since boyhood, and was respected by everyone at Silver Creek. When the men returned to their duties, Blanche helped Eleanor clear the table. "Your husband seems a good man," she observed. "The best," Eleanor agreed, though it took time for me to trust that. She hesitated, then added, "My first husband was like yours. Not all men are monsters, Blanche, though I know that's hard to believe right now." Over the next week, Blanche settled into life at Silver Creek. She learned the rhythms of ranch work, rising before dawn to help prepare breakfast, tending to household chores, and assisting Eleanor with everything from mending to preserving late autumn vegetables from the kitchen garden. She saw little of Yates, who spent long days working with the cattle and training horses. When their paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite, but maintained a respectful distance that both relieved and disappointed her. The memory of his strong arms around her during that midnight ride remained vivid, though she tried to dismiss it as merely the gratitude of a rescued woman. 10 days after her arrival, Blanche was hanging laundry in the crisp morning air when hoofbeats approached. She turned to see Sheriff Mills from the nearby town of Riversbend, his expression grim as he dismounted. "Morning, Mrs. Sutton," he said, removing his hat. "Might I have a word?" Her heart stuttered. "Has something happened?" "I'm afraid I have news about your husband." The sheriff's weathered face showed genuine concern. "The remains of a man were found in the ruins of your homestead. I've confirmed it was Howard Sutton." Blanche's hands trembled on the damp sheet she held. "He's truly gone?" "Yes, madam. I'm sorry for your loss." She nodded, unsure what response was appropriate when the news brought not grief, but a complicated relief. "Thank you for telling me." "There's one more thing." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Before he died, your husband spoke to a neighbor who tried to help with the fire. He made certain accusations." Ice formed in her veins. "What sort of accusations?" "He claimed you set the fire deliberately, Mrs. Sutton, that you tried to murder him in his sleep." The injustice of it struck her like a physical blow. Even in death, Howard found ways to torment her. "That's a lie," she whispered. "He set the fire himself when he discovered I planned to leave him." "I suspected as much." The sheriff's eyes were kind. "Howard Sutton had a reputation for drinking and tall tales, but I needed to hear your side." "Am I under arrest?" "No, madam. There's no evidence against you. Just the dying words of a bitter man. Still, tongues will wag. Thought you should be prepared." After the sheriff departed, Blanche sat on the porch steps, numb with shock. Howard was dead, truly dead, yet his shadow still threatened her future. If people believed she was an arsonist and murderer, what place could she make for herself? "Bad news?" Yates's voice startled her. He stood a few yards away, leading his horse from the barn. "My husband is dead," she said flatly. "And he told people I tried to kill him." Yates secured his horse to the hitching post and approached, sitting beside her with a respectful distance between them. "What really happened that night?" The direct question, asked without judgment, broke something loose inside her. Words poured out how Howard had courted her sweetly after her father died, leaving her alone and vulnerable, how the charming suitor had transformed into a jealous, violent husband once the wedding vows were spoken, and finally, how she'd planned her escape only to be discovered. "He knocked me to the floor," she said, her voice hollow. Then threw the lantern against the wall. Said if I wouldn't be his wife, I wouldn't be anyone's. I managed to get outside while he was still raging. I thought he was right behind me." Yates listened silently, his face increasingly grim. When she finished, he removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "You've nothing to reproach yourself for, Mrs. Sutton." "Haven't I? A man is dead because of me." "A man is dead because of his own hatred," Yates corrected firmly. "You survived because you had the courage to run. There's no shame in that." His conviction steadied her. "Thank you, Mr. Ingram." "Yates, please." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Seems we've moved beyond formalities." "Blanche, then." They sat in companionable silence, watching clouds drift across the vast Montana sky. For the first time since that terrible night, Blanche felt a fragile peace settling over her. "I'm riding into town for supplies," Yates said eventually. "Would you care to join me? Might do you good to get away from the ranch for a spell." The invitation surprised her. "I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition. Could use the company, truth be told." Half an hour later, they rode toward Riversbend, Blanche seated comfortably on a gentle mare Eleanor had insisted she borrow. The November day was crisp but pleasant, with golden sunlight warming the landscape. "How long have you worked for the Lamberts?" she asked as they traveled. "Since 75. Came north after spending a few years driving cattle up from Texas. Joseph offered me a job when my horse came up lame outside his property." Yates glanced at her. "He and Eleanor, they're good people. Treat their hands like family." "I've noticed. It's rare. Rarer still to find a husband and wife who genuinely love each other after 20 years. His tone held admiration. Makes a man wonder if such a thing is possible for everyone or just the fortunate few. Blanche studied his profile, struck by the vulnerability of the admission. "You've never married?" "No." A shadow crossed his face. "Came close once, back in Texas. She chose a banker instead. Probably wise of her." "I doubt that." The words escaped before she could consider them. Yates looked at her sharply, then a slow smile warmed his features. "Kind of you to say." Rivers Bend was a small but growing town nestled in a valley where two rivers converged. A single main street boasted essential businesses: general store, hotel, saloon, blacksmith, and small church. As they rode in, Blanche was acutely aware of eyes turning their way, of whispers behind hands. "Ignore them," Yates murmured. "People always need something to talk about." At the general store, the proprietor's wife served them with cool politeness, her eyes lingering on Blanche's face with poorly disguised curiosity. As Yates negotiated for supplies, Blanche wandered to the fabric section, admiring a bolt of green calico she could never afford. "That would suit you," came a woman's voice. Blanche turned to find a well-dressed lady in her 40s regarding her kindly. "I'm Margaret Wilson. My husband is the town doctor." "Blanche Sutton." "I know." Margaret's direct gaze held no judgment. "My husband attended your husband after the fire. Howard was not in his right mind at the end." Heat rose to Blanche's cheeks. "Mrs. Wilson, I didn't—" "You needn't explain to me, dear. Thomas has treated enough of Howard's victims over the years to form his own conclusions." She lowered her voice. "Not every woman escapes men like that. I'm glad you did." Before Blanche could respond, Margaret selected the green calico and several other fabrics, placing them on the counter. "Add these to Mr. Ingram's order, please," she told the shopkeeper. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly," Blanche protested. "Consider it a welcome gift. Every woman deserves a fresh start." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Come for tea sometime. The doctor's house is just past the church." As they rode back to Silver Creek, the wagon loaded with supplies and Blanche's unexpected gifts, she found herself both confused and comforted by the interaction. Why would she show such kindness to a stranger? "Not everyone believes the worst of others," Yates replied. "The Wilsons are good people. The doctor probably knew Howard's true nature better than most." Even so, decent folk exist. Sometimes they appear when we need them most." He gave her a sidelong glance. "Like you finding Silver Creek." "Finding you," she corrected softly. "I'd have died in those woods if you hadn't come along." Something flickered in his eyes, quickly masked. "Just happened to be in the right place." "Why were you riding so late at night?" He was silent for a moment. "Sometimes I can't sleep. The war left me with memories I'd rather not revisit. Riding helps clear my head." The admission, clearly not one he made lightly, touched her. "I'm sorry. It must have been terrible." "It was. But it was also long ago." He straightened in the saddle. "We should reach the ranch before sunset if we keep this pace." As winter descended on Silver Creek, the ranch settled into its cold weather routines. The cattle were moved to sheltered pastures, repairs were made to buildings before the heavy snows, and evenings lengthened with stories around the fireplace. Blanche found unexpected peace in this new life. The Lamberts treated her with unfailing kindness, The ranch hands respected her, and gradually, the haunted look left her eyes. Sometimes, she caught herself laughing a sound she'd nearly forgotten. Her relationship with Yates evolved cautiously. They spoke often during meals or evening gatherings, discovering shared interests in books and music. He brought her wildflowers he found during rides, taught her to play checkers, and always seemed to appear when a task required strength she lacked. Yet he never presumed, never stood too close, never made her feel threatened. One evening in early December, as snow fell heavily outside, Joseph asked Yates to play his fiddle. The foreman initially demurred, but at Eleanor's insistence, he retrieved the instrument from his quarters in the bunkhouse. The first notes were hesitant, but soon the music flowed haunting melodies that spoke of longing and hope, of wilderness and home. Blanche watched his strong hands move deftly over the strings, his usually guarded expression open and transported. When he finished a particularly beautiful air, she found tears on her cheeks. "That was lovely," she said when their eyes met across the room. A faint smile touched his lips. "My mother taught me. She played for dances back in Virginia before the war." "Play something we can dance to, Yates," Eleanor suggested, her eyes twinkling as she glanced between them. He obliged with a lively reel. Joseph swept his wife into an impromptu dance, their movements speaking of decades of partnership. The ranch hands clapped in rhythm, and one grabbed the cook for a turn around the room. "Miss Sutton?" A young ranch hand named Timothy approached Blanche shyly. "Would you care to dance?" Before she could answer, Yates's music faltered briefly. Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them, a question perhaps, or a possibility. "Thank you, Timothy," she said gently, "but I think I'll just enjoy watching tonight." Later, as the gathering dispersed for the night, Yates walked with her to the foot of the stairs. "You could have danced," he said quietly. "I didn't want to," she replied, studying his face in the lamplight. "Not with Timothy." His eyes darkened with understanding. "Blanche." "Good night, Yates." She climbed the first step, bringing their faces level with each other. For a moment she thought he might close the distance between them, but he stepped back, hat in hand. "Good night," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Sleep well." Christmas approached, bringing festive preparations to the ranch. Blanche helped Eleanor decorate the house with pine boughs and red ribbons, baked traditional cookies from her mother's recipes, and secretly worked on gifts for the family who had given her so much. For Eleanor, she embroidered handkerchiefs with delicate flowers. For Joseph, she knitted warm wool socks. For the ranch hands, she baked individual tins of treats. And for Yates, the gift she agonized over most, she repurposed one of the fabrics Margaret Wilson had given her, creating a soft case for his fiddle, embroidered with his initials and musical notes. On Christmas Eve, snow fell in gentle flurries as everyone gathered in the main house for a celebratory dinner. The table groaned with roast goose, potatoes, vegetables from the root cellar, and pies of every description. Wine flowed freely, and even the most taciturn ranch hands grew merry. After dinner, gifts were exchanged by the light of the Christmas tree. Blanche was overwhelmed to receive presents from everyone: a beautiful woolen shawl from Eleanor and Joseph, hand-carved combs from the cook, and books from several of the hands who had pooled their resources. "There's one more," Eleanor said, handing Blanche a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a silver bracelet of simple but elegant design, with a small charm in the shape of a horse. The card read simply, "For new beginnings, Y.I." Blanche looked up to find Yates watching her intently from across the room. When she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, a smile transformed his serious face, reaching all the way to his eyes. Later, when most of the household had retired, Blanche found Yates alone on the porch, smoking a rare cigarette and watching the falling snow. He extinguished it when she appeared, wrapped in her new shawl. "You shouldn't be out in the cold. he said, concern evident in his voice. Neither should you. She joined him at the railing. Thank you for the bracelet. It's beautiful. Glad you like it. In the silvery moonlight filtering through the clouds, his face looked younger, less guarded. Your gift was thoughtful. No one's ever made something like that for me before. Yates. She gathered her courage, heart pounding. Why have you been so kind to me? He considered her question seriously. At first, because you needed kindness. Later, his voice dropped. Because I couldn't help myself. The admission hung between them, fraught with possibility. Blanche took a step closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. I'm still afraid sometimes, she confessed. Not of you, never of you, but of trusting my own judgment, of being wrong again. You weren't wrong, Blanche. You were betrayed. His hand moved as if to touch her face, then dropped back to his side. I would never hurt you, but I understand your caution. What I feel when I'm with you, she whispered. It's nothing like what I felt with Howard, even in the beginning. This is different. Snow collected on the brim of his hat, on the shoulders of his coat. Different how? Peaceful. Safe. She swallowed hard. And terrifying in an entirely new way. Understanding dawned in his eyes. With exquisite gentleness, he took her gloved hand in his. I'll wait, he promised. However long you need. Christmas passed into the new year of 1886, and winter tightened its grip on Montana. January brought temperatures so bitter that ranch work was limited to essential tasks, leaving more time for indoor pursuits. Blanche taught several of the younger hands to read better, using books from Joseph's library. Yates often joined these impromptu lessons, not as a student but as an observer, his quiet presence both comforting and distracting. Their friendship deepened through shared moments, chess games by the fire, stories exchanged over coffee, conversations that stretched into the night long after others had retired. Yates spoke of his childhood in Virginia, his service in the Confederate cavalry during the war, and his wandering years afterward. Blanche shared memories of her mother, who had died when she was 16, leaving her alone with a father who had seen her only as property to be managed. He wasn't cruel, she explained one evening as they sat in the kitchen, the house quiet around them. Just indifferent. When Howard began courting me, Father was relieved someone wanted to take responsibility for me. You were never a responsibility to be transferred, Yates said, his voice tight with controlled anger. You were a person to be cherished. The simple statement delivered with such conviction brought tears to her eyes. No one has ever seen me that way before. His hand covered hers on the table. I do. February brought a brief thaw, allowing for more outdoor activity. One clear afternoon, Yates invited Blanche to ride with him to check on cattle in a distant pasture. Eleanor packed them a lunch with a knowing smile that made Blanche blush. They rode through snow-covered hills, the sky a brilliant blue above them. Yates pointed out deer tracks, the flight of eagles, and distant mountain peaks visible only on the clearest days. He was different away from the ranch, more relaxed, more talkative, his smile coming more readily. At midday they stopped in a sheltered grove of pines where the sun had melted most of the snow. Yates spread a blanket and they shared Eleanor's lunch of bread, cheese, and cold chicken, followed by apple cake wrapped in waxed paper. I've been thinking, he said as they lingered over coffee from a thermos, about the future. What about it? Joseph offered to sell me a piece of land about 100 acres at the north end of the property. Good water, decent grazing. I've saved enough over the years to buy it and build a small house. Blanche's heart quickened. You'd leave the bunkhouse? I'm 38 years old, he said with a wry smile. Too old to be living with the young hands, listening to their snoring and tall tales. A house of your own would be nice. His eyes held hers steadily. A home would be nicer. The implication hung between them, clear but unstated. Blanche looked down at her hands where she still wore her wedding band, not out of loyalty to Howard, but as protection from unwanted attention in town. "I'm still married in the eyes of the law," she said quietly, "until the probate court finalizes everything." "I know." Yates's voice was gentle. "I'm not asking for promises, Blanche, just telling you my thoughts." She twisted the gold ring, which had grown loose as she regained the weight Howard's cruelty had stolen. With sudden decision, she pulled it off and placed it on a flat rock beside the blanket. "I don't need this anymore," she said, feeling lighter. "Whatever the law says, I'm not Howard Sutton's wife. I haven't been since the moment he tried to burn me alive." Yates's eyes darkened. Slowly, deliberately, he picked up a stone and handed it to her. "Would you like to do the honors?" Understanding his intention, Blanche rose and walked to the edge of a ravine. With all her strength, she hurled both the ring and the stone into the depths, listening with satisfaction to the distant clatter as they vanished among the rocks below. When she turned back, Yates was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch pride mingled with something deeper, warmer. He stood and approached, stopping just before her. "May I?" he asked softly, his hands hovering near her waist. At her nod, he drew her into an embrace that felt like coming home. Blanche rested her cheek against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath layers of wool and cotton. His arms encircled her without constraining her, strong yet yielding if she chose to step away. She didn't. Instead, she tilted her face up to his. Yates searched her eyes for permission before lowering his mouth to hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. His lips were warm despite the winter air, gentle in their exploration. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with her own. "I've wanted to do that since Christmas," he confessed. "Why did you wait?" "Because you needed to be the one to decide." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Your choices were taken from you before. I won't ever do that." As March arrived with hints of spring, news came from Rivers Bend. The probate court had officially declared Howard Sutton dead and Blanche his widow. The homestead and what remained of their possessions were legally hers to dispose of. "Will you go back?" Eleanor asked as they prepared dinner that evening. "To salvage anything?" Blanche shook her head. "There's nothing there I want." She hesitated, then added, "I thought I might sell the land if anyone would buy it." "Might be wise." Eleanor gave her a perceptive look. "Would you use the money to move on from Silver Creek?" "No." The vehemence of her response surprised them both. More calmly, she continued, "I've found happiness here. I don't want to leave." "Because of the ranch? Or because of a certain foreman?" Heat rose to Blanche's cheeks, though she and Yates had been discreet. Their growing closeness hadn't escaped notice. "Both," she admitted. "But yes, Yates is part of it." Eleanor smiled, patting her hand. "He's a good man. Joseph and I have hoped for years he'd find someone worthy of him." "Do you think I am?" The question escaped before she could reconsider it. "My dear," Eleanor said firmly, "you are exactly what he needs, and he is what you deserve." That evening, Yates asked Blanche to walk with him after dinner. They strolled toward the corral where a new foal, born just days earlier, frolicked beside its mother in the last light of day. "She's beautiful," Blanche said, watching the spindly-legged creature attempt to kick. "She is." Yates leaned against the fence beside her, their shoulders touching. "I heard about the court decision. Congratulations on your freedom." She turned to study his profile. "Is that what it is? Freedom? Isn't it?" "I've been free since the night I ran from that burning house," she said thoughtfully. "What the court decided just makes it official for everyone else." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Will you sell the homestead?" "I think so. I never want to see it again, but the land has value." You could build a new life with that money. Go anywhere. Do anything. Something in his tone made her look more closely at him. Are you suggesting I should leave Silver Creek? No. The word was emphatic. He took her hand, his grip warm and sure. But I want you to know you have choices. Real ones. Yates Ingram, she said, turning fully toward him. Are you trying to give me an opportunity to leave you? A flush rose above his collar. I'm trying to make sure you don't stay out of obligation or gratitude. You ridiculous man. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the roughness of his evening stubble beneath her fingers. I stay because I want to. Because this place, these people you have become my home. The tension left his shoulders. Then I have something to ask you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. Not now, if you're not ready. But someday. From the pouch, he produced a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire. It was my mother's, he explained. She gave it to me before she died, said to save it for the right woman. Blanche's heart thundered in her chest as he held it between them, not yet offering it, just showing her the possibility it represented. I love you, Blanche Sutton, he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. I think I have since that first night, when you looked up at me from beneath that pine tree with more courage than anyone I've ever known. Yates. Let me finish. He took a deep breath. I want to build a life with you. A home, a family if you wish it. But only if it's truly what you want. The ring is yours whenever you're ready. Whether that's today or a year from now. Tears blurred her vision as she looked from the ring to his beloved face. How different this was from Howard's imperious proposal, which had seemed more a business arrangement with her father than a declaration of love. What if I'm ready now? She whispered. His eyes widened. Are you certain? There's no rush. I've spent 6 years in a marriage without love, she interrupted. I don't want to waste another day when I could be building something beautiful with you. With trembling hands, he took her left hand where no ring had rested since she threw Howard's into the ravine and slipped the sapphire onto her finger. It fit as if made for her. I love you, she said as he gathered her into his arms. You, who found me in darkness and showed me I could trust again. His kiss was different this time, still gentle, but with an undercurrent of passion that promised deeper intimacies to come. When they finally parted, breathless, stars had appeared in the darkening sky above them. We should tell Joseph and Eleanor, Yates said, his arms secure around her waist as they walked back toward the house. They'll be pleased, Blanche predicted. Eleanor all but gave me her blessing this afternoon. Yates chuckled. Joseph did the same when he heard about the court decision, said it was about time I stopped mooning around the ranch and made my intentions clear. Was it that obvious? Apparently, I'm not as inscrutable as I believed. His smile was tender as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Or perhaps, love is simply impossible to hide. The wedding took place in early May, when wildflowers carpeted the meadows and new leaves adorned the trees. Margaret Wilson helped arrange for the ceremony to be held at Silver Creek rather than in town, understanding Blanche's desire for privacy after the whispers and speculation surrounding Howard's death. Eleanor transformed the ranch house with bouquets of spring blossoms, white ribbons, and candles. Joseph, who had known the circuit judge for decades, ensured he would be present to perform the ceremony. The ranch hands constructed an arbor near the creek, where Blanche had first begun to feel at home in Montana. On the morning of her wedding, Blanche stood before the mirror in her room, scarcely recognizing herself. The dress she wore, made from the green calico Margaret had given her, supplemented with cream-colored lace, complemented her golden hair and brought out the color in her cheeks. Eleanor had helped style her hair in an elegant arrangement adorned with tiny white flowers. You look beautiful, Eleanor said, adjusting the simple veil. Truly radiant. I feel like I'm dreaming, Blanche admitted. A year ago, I couldn't imagine being happy again, let alone loved. Yet here you are. Eleanor squeezed her hands. About to marry a man who adores you. Is he nervous? Blanche couldn't help asking. She hadn't seen Yates since the previous evening, when he'd kissed her goodnight with a reverence that made her ache for their future together. Eleanor laughed. Joseph says he's paced a trench in the bunkhouse floor, but not from doubt, only from eagerness to begin your life together. The ceremony itself was simple, but deeply moving. Joseph escorted Blanche from the house to the arbor, where Yates waited in a new suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his eyes never leaving her as she approached. The ranch hands stood as witnesses, along with Eleanor, Margaret, and Dr. Wilson, and several neighboring ranchers who had become friends. As they exchanged vows, Blanche's voice remained steady, filled with certainty. When Yates promised to cherish and protect her all the days of his life, she saw in his eyes the truth of his words, not the hollow promises Howard had made, but genuine commitment founded on respect and deep love. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the judge declared, beaming at the couple. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Ingram. Yates cupped her face with infinite tenderness before claiming her lips in a kiss that sealed their union. Around them, cheers erupted from their friends and chosen family. The celebration continued into evening, with a feast prepared by Eleanor and the cook, music from Yates's fiddle, and a guitar played by one of the hands, and dancing beneath lanterns hung from the trees. As twilight descended, Yates led Blanche away from the festivities toward the path that would take them to their new home. In the months since their engagement, Yates had worked tirelessly on the small house he'd built on his land. Blanche had helped when she could, choosing finishes and furnishings, planting a garden that would bloom in future years. Now, as they approached on horseback, lanterns glowed in the windows, welcoming them home. Yates dismounted and lifted her down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her across the threshold. Inside, the main room was warmed by a crackling fire. Fresh flowers adorned the table, and a bottle of wine waited with 2 glasses. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ingram," he said, setting her gently on her feet. "It's perfect," she whispered, taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings, the bookshelves already filled with volumes they both treasured, the curtains she had sewn herself. "Everything I could have wished for. I have something for you." Yates reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package. A wedding gift. Unwrapping it, Blanche found a silver locket similar to her mother's, which had been lost in the fire Howard set. Inside was a tiny daguerreotype of Yates on one side and space on the other. "For our future," he explained. "Perhaps someday, a child's portrait." Tears of happiness welled in her eyes. "I'd like that," she said softly. "A family of our own, in this home you've built with such love." He fastened the locket around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. "I want to give you everything you desire, Blanche. Safety, happiness, children if you want them, everything Howard tried to take from you." She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "You already have," she assured him. "By loving me, you've given me back myself." His kiss deepened with newfound freedom, the restraint of their courtship giving way to the intimacy of marriage. As he lifted her again to carry her to their bedroom, Blanche knew with absolute certainty that while fire had nearly destroyed her once, it had also forged her into someone stronger, someone capable of embracing the passion in Yates's touch without fear. In the glow of firelight, husband and wife discovered each other fully for the first time, their union as tender as it was passionate. Yates's reverence for her body healed wounds Howard had inflicted, while Blanche's eager response to his touch assured him that her choice was made freely and joyfully. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath quilts Eleanor had given them as a wedding present, Blanche rested her head on her husband's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Happy? He asked, his fingers combing gently through her unbound hair. Completely. She pressed a kiss to his skin. And you? More than I ever thought possible. His arms tightened around her. I've waited my whole life for you, Blanche Ingram. Outside, spring winds whispered through pines that would shelter them through Montana's harsh winters and brilliant summers. Inside, the fire burned steadily in the hearth of the home they had created together, not a destructive blaze, but a sustaining warmth that would light their way forward. 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on Silver Creek Ranch as Blanche hung laundry in the yard behind the Ingram home. Her 3-year-old daughter, Eleanor, named for the woman who had become like a mother to Blanche, chased butterflies nearby, her golden curls bouncing with each step. "Careful near the garden, Ellie," Blanche called as the child veered toward the vegetable beds. "Remember what Papa said about the young plants? They're fragile," Ellie recited seriously, altering her course. "Like baby birds." Blanche smiled, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her abdomen where their second child grew. At 4 months along, her condition was just becoming visible beneath her apron. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. Yates approached on horseback, their 5-year-old son James seated proudly in front of him. The boy had his father's dark hair and steady demeanor, though his eyes were Blanche's clear blue. "Mama!" James called excitedly. "We saw the new calves. And Papa let me help with the counting." "Did he now?" Blanche shaded her eyes, watching as Yates dismounted and lifted their son down. "And were you a good helper?" "The best," Yates confirmed, ruffling the boy's hair. "He's got a knack for it." Ellie abandoned her butterflies to rush at her father, who swept her up with practiced ease. "And what have you been doing, little one?" "Helping Mama with the wash," the child declared, though her assistance had consisted mainly of handing Blanche clothespins at random intervals. "A fine job." Yates kissed her cheek before setting her down. As the children ran off to play, he approached Blanche, his eyes warming as they always did when he looked at her. "And how are you feeling today?" "Better than yesterday." She accepted his kiss, leaning into his solid warmth. "Dr. Wilson says the morning sickness should pass soon." Yates's hand covered hers on her stomach, a protective gesture that had become familiar during her pregnancies. "Rest if you need to. James and I can finish the laundry." "I'm perfectly capable of hanging sheets, Yates Ingram." Her mock indignation was belied by the smile she couldn't suppress. "But I wouldn't say no to help with supper." "Deal." He kissed her again, lingering a moment longer. "Joseph and Eleanor are coming for dinner. They've got news." "Oh?" Blanche raised an eyebrow. "Good news, I hope." "Seems Joseph is finally ready to retire, wants to travel east to visit Eleanor's sister." Yates's expression grew serious. "He's offering me the foreman position permanently, with an ownership stake in Silver Creek." Blanche's eyes widened. "Yates, that's wonderful news. You've earned it after all these years." "It would mean more responsibility," he cautioned. "Less time at home, especially during busy seasons." "We'd manage." She touched his face, feeling the familiar contours beneath her fingertips. "The children and I could help more with your land. James is already eager to be a rancher like his papa." Pride and love mingled in Yates's expression. "I'd have said no 5 years ago. Wouldn't have believed I deserved such an opportunity. And now? Now I have you believing in me." His smile was tender. "Makes a man think anything's possible." They walked hand in hand to where their children played, James showing his sister how to build a small dam in the creek that ran behind their property. The water caught the sunlight, glittering like the promise they had made to each other 5 years earlier. That evening, as their friends gathered around the Ingram table to celebrate Joseph's announcement and Yates's new position, Blanche looked at the life she had built from the ashes of her past. Eleanor, now in her 60s but still vibrant, bounced Ellie on her knee while Joseph and Yates discussed the future of Silver Creek. James solemnly helped pass dishes, mimicking his father's courteous manners. Later, after their guests departed and the children were tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Blanche and Yates sat on the porch swing he had built during her first pregnancy. Fireflies danced in the summer darkness while cicadas sang their nighttime chorus. "I had a letter from Margaret Wilson today," Blanche said, nestled against Yates's side. She mentioned seeing a new family in town, a woman with bruises she tried to hide, and two small children who flinch at loud noises. Yates's arm tightened around her shoulders. "History repeating itself? I'm afraid so." She looked up at him. "I've invited her to tea next week." Margaret thought, perhaps my story might help her see a way forward. "You're a remarkable woman, Blanche Ingram." His voice held reverence and pride. "Using your pain to light the way for others." "I had help finding my path," she reminded him, touching the sapphire ring that still adorned her finger. "Sometimes all it takes is knowing escape is possible, that burning isn't the only option." Yates's lips brushed her temple. "Whatever you need to help her, you have my support." They sat in companionable silence, watching stars appear in the vast Montana sky. The home behind them, built with love and hard work, sheltered their sleeping children. The future stretched before them, not without challenges but rich with possibilities they would face together. "I love you," Blanche whispered, the words still fresh after 5 years of marriage. "And I love you," Yates answered, his voice holding the same certainty it had the day he found her in the wilderness, lost and afraid. "From now until forever." As they went inside, hand in hand, Blanche thought of how far she had traveled from that terrible night when flames had driven her into darkness. The fire Howard had set, meant to destroy her, had instead forged a path to a life more beautiful than she could have imagined, a life where love burned steadily, warming without consuming, illuminating without scarring. In Yates's arms, she had found not just safety, but partnership, not merely shelter, but home. And in that home, surrounded by the family they had created together, Blanche Ingram knew with absolute certainty that she would never burn again.